Welcome to the Meeple Syrup Show, where designers discuss design. We're on episode 91. Step 91 is profit. That's right. We're going to be talking about designing for commerce versus creation for fun. I'm here with my co-host Sen Fong Lim, who we've sadly not had the last couple of weeks. How you doing, Sen?
I'm doing fine. How are you, Daryl?
I'm doing great, and we have a couple fantastic guests. But before we go there, I'm curious, Sen, have you been playing any good games lately?
Define good.
Uh-oh.
Well, no. Okay, so a couple weeks ago was Jeff Con, one of our friends. Daryl and I have a friend named Jeff Temple who loves board games, and he every year has a little convention in his own honor, of course.
I
Uh,
love it. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I got to play a couple games that I haven't played before. So Mechs versus Minions,
Mm.
which is fun. I mean, it informed a lot of interesting things about taking a video game IP and making it into a game.
Sure.
Because it's not at all related to League of Legends, right? So it is marginally, but that was what I actually took away from that is like, it's actually better to not try to emulate the exact game,
Right.
right?
Interesting.
Because you really can't, I don't think, do a justice for something that's so twitchy as,
Right.
well, League of Legends. The other thing that I learned from Mechs vs. Minion is that it's programming done right in a lot of
Cool.
ways.
Cool.
So not that it's the best programming game out there, but a lot of other programming games, we get a lot of disenchantment from players who don't like their plans getting messed up, right?
Right.
So, like, let's say we're talking Colt Express or the Granddaddy Robo Rally, and you're programming your machines and your movement and whatever, or your gunslinger, and you say, "I'm gonna fire my gun," and there's nobody there. Ha 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 for everybody except for you,
Right.
who actually wanted to do something. So the lack of agency is very high in those games,
Yep.
and so a lot of people dislike it. But what happens in Mechs versus Minions is that it's a team game. So it's a
Hmm.
team programming game, which actually made the chaos more fun because we're laughing at all of us,
Right.
not just one person who failed. And so winning is, obviously team based, and that's good. Um, Versus, I lost because my programming sucks or because of fate. It feels very fatalistic in a lot of programming games, whereas this one
Yep.
was was much more a thing that I could do for a longer period of time, I think, over and over again, because it was just kind of, that's what it is. Although I will say that it definitely needs the campaign mode in order to keep it fresh, because it's very simplistic otherwise. But yeah, great first effort from Riot Games, the video game company that made their own board game, and the minions are obviously beautiful and whatnot. So I look
And
forward
I
to
hear a
playing
nice
them.
insert.
Oh yeah, very nice insert made by our friend Noel Alman at Game Trace. I also got to play Mystic Vale finally. Mystic Vale is a good mechanism that I don't think is fully realized in that game. I didn't care what anybody else did ever because of the way the game plays. Um,
Right.
the game plays very much like, you basically, it's a race to see who can get the most points out of this pool of points. And while that's okay, it doesn't make me care about what you have or what you did. I just care about what I have and what I did.
Right.
I found the making of the cards very interesting, but other
Hmm.
than that,
I,
it's
I have heard the expansions are already in process or maybe even in stores.
there is an
And
expansion already. Yeah, so I didn't get to play
yeah,
that.
and I heard basically the base game is just to get you familiar and comfortable with the cards, and maybe some of that solved with the expansion.
Maybe, I don't know if that's the best way to do it though,
Right.
because it was a lackluster game, and I will probably not pick it up, or unless somebody says you have to, because
Sure.
in which case, why cut your audience off? I mean, I talk about presenting the best game possible in your first play ever, and there's been a couple lately that I've played that it's like, really, that's not putting your best foot forward, and Mystic Vale was one of those. So, although I mean, I'm enchanted by the whole idea of constructing your cards, so that's cool. On the
Hmm.
prototype front, lately, Jesse and I've been working on a couple things for IDW.
Woohoo.
So That's good. And then obviously Jay and I, a couple things for IDW, Toy Vault as well. So lots of stuff happening in the prototyping world. Games are getting signed left, right, and center. So that's nice. Got a couple more things going on and pitching for some very interesting IPs now, actually, and today. So I was just writing up a pitch document for that. So hopefully things will come to fruition. How about you, Daryl? What have you been playing?
Exciting. Well, actually, last night I got to play a prototype by Rob Davio, Lock and Key.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Really good. Co-op game, really fun.
Have you read the comic book?
I have only done a little kind of surface reading, like a few stories in. So.
Oh, dude, I don't know if it's your style at all. It's like gothic horror stuff. So
yeah,
it's pretty dark and twisted, but it's amazing. And so it's funny because the first game, the Cryptozoic Lock and Key game, was such a disappointment for me as a big fan of the show. And then hearing that Rob was going to do it, because I mean Jay and I had obviously pushed to try to do that because we both love Lock and Key.
No,
but
you
when
will
Rob
not be
got
disappointed.
it, oh, not at all. I was in fact even happier that Rob got to do it. And I mean, do you know that Rob like lived next door?
No.
Like, yeah, like, so I'm pretty sure, and Rob can correct me. Rob, if you're listening, correct me. That Rob and the King family are like next door neighbors.
That's hilarious.
Yeah,
cool.
So it's yeah, or at least Joe Hill and Rob were friends in childhood.
Gotcha. Super fun. Well, yeah, so that was solid. Got to play some other stuff that I can't talk about yet. Then I'm trying to think of published games that I played recently. I played Kevin Nunn's Dragon Tides game.
Oh, right, yeah. I saw that on the shelf. Yeah, was it good?
So fun. He has this really clever counterattack that's built into the dice, so that when you roll your dice to do your attack, you assess, and then right away you assess like a counterattack off the same dice roll. Super clever, super fast, and it feels then like this little like, oh yeah, like you just got this like back and forth that happens really nice. So well done by Kevin and Luther on that game. And highly recommend people try to track it down. It's a lot of fun, very thematic. So if you're looking for a skirmish game that's got some great thematic integration, highly recommend that one.
And the miniatures are nice.
Oh, the miniatures are great. Greenbrier did the minis, and they did a great job with them. So
right. And then it's Artistic Justice.
Artistic Justice is the publisher. Right. So. Also, I just want to give just a quick shout out, some sad news that we just heard about this week, the passing of Donna Balkin. Our prayers and thoughts are with Jim and the family. Donna's someone both Sen and I have known for many years. She's very supportive of the game community, a smiling face that we always look forward to seeing at the gathering. And she will be missed. So I wanted to mention that as well. But with that, let's turn to our guests and start talking about our topic. Our topic, again, is designing for commerce versus creation for fun. We have with us Adam Wyse, another Game Artisans of Canada member. We're taking over the world. And we also have Joey Vigour, who is in Los Angeles, I believe.
Oh, yes.
And deep down in our hearts is also maybe an honorary GAC member.
Well, Joey does spell his last name correctly, so we'll give him that.
Oh,
he's at least partially Canadian in that amount, right? Which is good.
There you go.
Canadian, so British, yes.
Sen, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So today we're talking with Joey and Adam about creation for profit. I mean, when you got into this, I'll ask Joey first. Joey, when you got into game design, was it to try to make money? Was it to make a business out of it? Because I know that's what you're doing now with Mirrorbox games. But really, what was your first step into game design? Was it money or was it love?
There's no third option. That's it.
No, you can't. What was your third option?
They all cook down to that.
No. Yeah, what would be the third option then?
No, the highest future I had even thought for the game I was working on was to put it together as a package, like a PDF, and then put it on Reddit, and maybe like some people on Reddit would like download it and glue it together and play it, and then email me and say they liked it. That was it was utterly inconceivable to have it go any higher than that. And the only reason why I kept going is because I kept getting encouragement. I went to the first convention just to try to find out basically the best ways to prototype. And then people said, "Oh, why don't you just sell it to a publisher?" And I was like, "Well, isn't that like selling a screenplay to 20th Century Fox?" And they're like, "No." So then I met a bunch of publishers, but all the publishers said, "Oh, well, we like this game, but maybe it could be pirates, or we'll change the theme, or we'll only make 3,000 copies." And I, which sounded good at the time, but then they said, "Oh, we have a 2 to 3 year period before it'll come out." There's all these little reasons why I thought, well, I could just make it myself at that point. And then I saw Richard Bliss give a talk at that con, and he talked about Kickstarter, which I'd never even heard of. So then I decided to kickstart it. So it's sort of it's not one thing. It's sort of a snowball, but definitely it was passion for the game itself, just to see if anyone else liked it as much as me. And it went from there.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Well, I mean, I'm going to echo the question kind of similar to start us off with Adam. I'm curious, what was kind of your origin story? You know, was it love or money that drew you in?
Or a spider bite? A radioactive spider bite.
Yeah, it was definitely love for me too. I don't know if many people get into this game design world without a passion for games. And I think you need that to keep you driving forward and keep producing new things. For me, I saw some neat dice online, and I was like, I wonder if I could make a game involving some dice. I'd only really gotten into modern board gaming about a year prior. So I wasn't familiar with too many different types of games and things like that. I was only like kind of scratching the surface. And I'm an engineer, so I saw these dice and I was like, I wonder what I could do with them. And the game turned out pretty horrible.
You know, that doesn't surprise me that you're an engineer. It really doesn't.
Yeah, well, it started the process, and from there, I just wanted to see what I could do next, kind of thing, and never with a financial goal. It was always, I wanted to play some games that I would find interesting with my friends. I want to see what I can do, and I want to make something that other people can enjoy. And only more recently, I've had a little more success in signings and those kind of things, and I'm seeing a little bit of the financial side and dealing with pitching to publishers and all that. But definitely passion.
Awesome. Joey, bouncing back to you. When you are designing, especially now, you know, the early passion days are gone. Curious, when you're designing, are you factoring in kind of the commercial, the business side of games more? What kind of things might you be processing as a designer now with experience that influences your design process?
Well, the passion is not gone, first of all. I feel bad for you if it has. My key to that, I will say, though, is that I don't focus on more. I mean, I work on a lot of projects at once, but I don't really lose sight of my sort of primary, my favorite, my most important project at the time. And I have a whiteboard which has, you know, basically in order the ones I'm most passionate about, and I keep the passion at the top. And all the ones at the top, I've noticed, always are ones that I'm planning on publishing myself. So I forgot the question. Does that come close to it?
Yeah, I like it. Adam, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I've got an example with one of my designs recently called Leprechaun Tractors, and it's like a game where you build rainbows. Your leprechaun's working in the rainbow factory, and you're building rainbows using blocks, big wooden blocks, and it's an awesome component, and it feels really great. but it's kind of cost prohibitive, and it's not something. When I took it to Origins, no one was really interested because it's a whole bunch of blocks. It weighs a whole lot. So recently, I've taken an initiative to make it more palatable, more publishable. Change those blocks into flat chipboard. It doesn't feel as nice, but it's more down the commercial route. The game's the same, but yeah. It's an example that I've done recently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's one experience I've had which is pretty ongoing, which is basically I will design thinking of myself first, thinking I want to publish this myself. And then it'll get to a point where I'll realize, this isn't quite the kind of thing I want to do, or it's a little bit not up to the quality that I would want to do myself. So I'll just pitch it to basically a bunch of friends. And at this point, all my friends are game publishers and designers. And usually if it's going to be a project that they're going to buy, and I've sold maybe 4 games now, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're ones that you can go to a retail store and buy. Usually that's money I just assume I'll never see again at that point. And the only reason why I even do it, I even push it off on them, is basically because I'm not going to pursue working on it more unless they want to pay me to develop it or something like that. Fine. But it's basically like taking all the screenplay pages that sit at the bottom of your drawer if you're a writer, and sort of just mailing them to the New York Times or something, and seeing if somebody wants it. And if they want it, fine. If they give it back without doing anything with it, fine. But I try to value my time more and more as time goes on, and focus on the projects that I'm passionate about.
That's a good question. So passion, I know from talking to you before, Joey, that passion was a really big thing for you for your very first game, in terms of it being based on a story that as a child you and I both loved. And so does that passion seep through? Do you find that the passion seeps through in your designing? And if so, how does that affect sales of things, or the profit, the end of the profit for things where, if the other people aren't as passionate about it? And is that why you self-publish? I mean, there's a lot of questions there, but go ahead.
So I make my living as a designer, which may seem crazy because if you Google my name or look on Board Game Geek, you won't see much. But the truth is that I have contracts with 2 different companies that hire me part-time as basically as a developer and designer for their projects. And I also run Kickstarters, and once the Kickstarter is fulfilled, I can make money off that. So passion is an interesting question. I worked 9 months on a project starting last year. I finished it earlier this year. And when I got to a point where it was sort of in a good place, the publisher that had hired me told me we made a deal with the distributor, and the distributor wants a lighter game. So we've actually hired someone else to design a lighter game simultaneous to you, and we're retheming that lighter game. So basically we're going to go ahead and pay you your advance, which was, I think, $3,000, which sounds like a lot, but it was a massive game. But we're not going to publish your game. But they still wanted it. And we basically had a deal, they were going to publish it. So, and it was for a theme that I couldn't have done anything with it, on my own. So I was going to take the money and say, okay, well, I'm passionate about this game, but there's nothing I can do with it. And I spoke to a lawyer, and he said, oh, just so you know, if you take the money, if you take the advance, it's basically just a buyout. So you can sort of walk away from it and assume that game is dead in the water. And I could not accept that. So I sent a polite email to the publisher and said, I'm going to take this game, reimagine it from scratch using all my mechanics. You can't use any of my mechanics in your game. And so I've been working on that game now for another 6 months, and it's way better and way awesomer than it was going to be. And that was money, believe me, that I could have used for rent.
Mm-hmm.
And I also had my name taken off the game that ended up resulting. So it's frustrating because, there's like it's like a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, or whatever they say. But ultimately, you know, there was money right here, proof, you know, definite money. And then there was this total question mark of passion and probably little to no money, or maybe millions of dollars, right? And I always went with the passion, and there was never any real question about it. I never regretted the decision, but it's hard to make those decisions.
Yeah, those are the tough ones. Adam, what about you? So I know that things are just starting to get rolling for you in terms of contracts and whatnot. Have you ever had to say no because of how you felt about the level of passion or interest that was being invested in your game?
I haven't really been in that kind of situation yet at this point. I'm kind of in development with two different companies on games that'll be coming out early next year, and I'm involved in the development process and have say in how the publisher wants to change the game at this point, and that can be a little tough when they're messing with your baby a little bit. But both companies I've been working with have been really good. But you tend to want to protect what you think is the way the game should be, and all this work that you put in. So I don't really have as great an example speaking to that, but I don't know where I'm going with this.
That's fair. Actually, I got a bit of a follow-up question with that. I am curious, as you're pitching games and going around and getting to know some of the publishers, is a factor for what are some of the factors that you're processing while you're meeting these publishers? I mean, you're pointing to a couple examples where you're involved. Is that something you're looking for? What other things are you looking for while you're pitching a game? Sure, you want a yes, but what else are you trying to get to know from the publisher?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely want some involvement. I want to have say during the process, because I feel very helpless. This game that I put so much work into, just having no more say from that point forward. Another big thing for me is the publisher's current collection of games, and like what they do, what the art looks like. That's a big thing. And as well, recently I've been considering a lot the timelines for a lot of publishers, because I tend to put out a lot of games during a year that get to a pitchable state, and it's a big factor for me how quickly a publisher can get something out to market. So the timelines, if I sign something, it's a little frustrating for it to come out 2 years later, because there's so many games coming out these days. It's so many new things can come out and have similar ideas. There's symmetrical design going on, and then your game is kind of not novel anymore. So timelines are a big thing.
Cool, great stuff. Jumping to Joey, I saw a smile with the timelines of like 2+ years with publishers and such. I'm curious. I mean, you've been involved with publishers, especially often in the background, but in general, what are you finding from your experience are realistic timelines? A, if you're going to run everything, and B, if you're working with a publisher, because you kind of wear both hats. You've kickstarted a lot of stuff, but you've also worked with publishers.
Right. So the reason I laughed was because in 2012 or 13, I was pitching Chaosmos to several publishers, I think at the Gamma Trade Show or something. And one was really supportive, like became like a lifelong friend kind of situation. And they basically said, we might do this, but just so you know, it'll take 2 years for it to come out, and we'll probably sell 3,000 to 5,000 copies of it. And at the time, I thought 2 years, this idiot knows nothing, right? So that was essentially the catalyst for me wanting to form a publishing company and actually make it myself. But you know, it took 2 years, and we've sold 3,300 copies of it. So he was right on target.
Who's the idiot now, Joe?
Yeah, I guess it was me. But of course, although to be fair, I've made a lot more money from the project.
Yeah, for sure.
Just because I kickstarted it and kept the profit from it. But I will say also though that and I had complete creative control. But that being said, I lost out on major distribution deals that he had in place and stuff like that. So it's a give and take for sure. But to answer the other timeline question about how long does it take me with versus publishers. So Battle Stations is a game I didn't design. Battle Stations Second Edition I kickstarted back in March, and you know that game comes with 45 miniatures, and it's just a massive box. There's so much stuff in there, and I'm basically the producer of the whole project, and we are about to submit the whole thing in like 2 weeks, which means you give it a few months for manufacture. I mean, it's going to take only about a year from the kickstart to going to retail stores, but that is an insane timeline for what that project is. And there of course might be holdups along the way that I'm not anticipating, but that's unusual, I will say. And also the design of that game, Jeff has worked on that game for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe the publishing is happening quickly, but it doesn't mean that part of the reason games get delayed is because there's issues with development and especially with play testing. So don't expect that to be a normal timeline. There's thousands of Battle Stations players who are also play testers. So there's not really a question about the rules of this state. It's really more about making sure that the minis are moldable and the cut lines are right on the punch boards and stuff like that.
Right. So it's more of the procedural stuff as opposed to the development of the game.
Right.
So Joey, let's talk about about turning that passion into profit. You say that you missed out maybe on some distribution deals. You missed out on some little excuse me, windows of opportunities here and there because you followed your passion instead of the profit line. Although in the end you might actually be more profitable. What does it take in order to actually see that, artistic vision through from a personality point of view, from you personally? What did it take to not say yes to that deal, to say, no, I'm going to do it my way?
Well, that particular deal was really difficult for me because it started out, I had stars in my eyes. It was a major IP and, major, very popular television show. They were talking about making, at one point, they were talking about making 100,000 units, and they had deals with Target already set up even before the game was designed. So it was nothing but stars or dollar signs, I should say, in my eyes. And then I started working on it, and I had to watch 9 seasons of a show and fell in love with the show. I'm sorry, I can't say what it is. Fell in love with it. And to the point where I felt like this was my world and I had to do it justice. And it took me so long to get it to the point where there was sort of an emergent narrative that within the gameplay that felt like what the show was, that by the time it got to the part where we were talking about cutting stuff out of the game, it was impossible. And I am also just particularly egotistical when it comes to that stuff because, I knew I was right. And I knew I was right about the game because the publisher was not interested in playing it. Basically, they just wanted it. They wanted it done. They wanted to know it was done. They wanted to send it to playtesters, but they didn't actually want to play it themselves. And they missed 4 meetings that was for them to play it. And I realized they've lost touch of what makes a it's a game designer turns into a publisher. Sometimes they lose track of what's important. So to answer your question, how to turn it into a profit, the answer is you have to have a lot of games and sell them to publishers, or focus on one game and know how to be a filmmaker and distributor and Kickstarter kind of person. You have to learn all these other magisteria in order to turn one game into a profitable enterprise. Or you can do the shotgun approach and just sell a bunch of games to a bunch of different publishers and hope that one of them sells more than a couple hundred copies.
Right. Cool. Adam, let's talk about you from the other end of the stick. Is there anything that you would be really passionate about working on? Like, what's your dream IP? If somebody said, "Hey, Adam, we're gonna sign, Star Wars or Star Trek or I don't know, The Hobbit or whatever," and you get to work on that game, what would that be for you, and how would that change your design process? Joey just talked about how, he lived the experience. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. I haven't really thought about that much. Most of my themes are very non IP based. There's a Brandon Sanderson series of books that I've read recently, the Stormlight Archive, that I would love to design a game based on that. But yeah, I probably don't read as much as I should. I'm spending all my time game designing, so I feel I should consume more media and maybe come up with some more IPs that I'd like to work for on games for. But yeah, I'm not really sure as far as an IP.
Okay, but how would that change your process, do you think? If you got that Brandon Sanderson license, how would it change your passion versus your profit margins? What do you think?
I think there'd be a whole lot of extra pressure because you're building on something that someone else has created this world, and you don't want to let anyone down. So you still got this passion, but you really have to. I think I would be much more focused on the commercial side, making sure that this could be a profitable thing for someone else. Game design for me has never been a high pressure thing. I'm sure working on the development side or the publisher side, there's a lot more pressure because you're relied on to make someone else's dream kind of come to life. But it'd be an interesting new experience, I think, to do something like that.
Okay, great. Daryl.
Yeah, well, I kind of want to follow this up with Adam. I'm curious, as you mentioned, for you, you're an engineer and then you're doing game design on the side. And I think that's true for most designers, that when it comes to board game design, the majority of our hobby is filled with designers who have day jobs. And then as Sen has coined the phrase, kind of your jobby on the side is this game design. And I'm curious if you have any tips or suggestions for people to manage those two worlds, and what are some of the pros and cons to having it as a side thing? What for you, how is it a pro to be your jobby?
It is a pro that I don't have to worry about my income from game design paying the rent, for one thing. That would be, again, like I was saying about pressure, that would put on so much pressure. And I don't know if I'd be able to grow as creatively if I was relying on money from game design to live my life, to support my wife and many cats. But my wife has very graciously offered that if we wanted to downsize and start renting a small house, we could rely on her income. I could do game design, and that would be incredible. But I don't want to put that kind of pressure both on myself and feeling guilty for having to rely only on her income. So yeah, it's very handy to have a source of income outside of game design, especially being early on into this journey. I've got one quick question for like Sen and Daryl. You do a lot of co-designs, and have you considered like now that more of your income is coming from the game design world, how do you find co-designs? Have you considered doing more solos just to get a bigger piece of the pie?
Well, for me, the piece of the pie is pretty irrelevant. Not that I'm independently wealthy or anything, but I've got a really good job, so I don't really mind having more people involved. As I get older and supposedly wiser, I recognize that I have limitations not only in time, but also in certain areas of skill, and that whoever I co-design with has added that indelible thing that I would never have thought of that made the game the game. And so, no, for me, co-designing is probably the way that I'm going to go as long as I can. I know that Jay, the guy who I co-design with most often, wants to do some solo design and just designs on his own, which is great and good for them. It's just not necessarily something I'm aiming for particularly. If something happens along that I'm so invested in it that I can do it all myself, I'll do it. But so far, nothing has really come along that I've been so against somebody helping me with it that I wanted it all for myself. What about you, Daryl?
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of echo the same. Not that I have a nice paying day job, but I am kind of following the approach that Joey was mentioning before about quantity. So, for instance, I work with lots of people in the hopes that I can design and make a lot of games. And for me, working with people is a catalyst so that I feel like I'm continuing to be creative, and working with different people inspires me. They, at times when I'm not carrying the ball, they are, so projects are continuing to move. And so for me, I find, even though I'm only getting half, I truly believe that I can make 2 games in code design faster than I can make 1 game by myself. So because of that, I just enjoy the process. I think for me, it makes the most sense to co-design on just a practical level with my current strategy of trying to design quantity. I do want to point this question to Joey, though, because he's tackling things in a different way, in that he is doing quantity often behind the scenes, but also then working on 1 or 2 projects at a time and really getting those projects to a great place. And I want to meld it with a question from one of our viewers. David Tomei asked the question, where is it? Do you have a profit point or goal in mind that helps you, for your year plan? Like, do you set targets, or are there certain things that you need over the course of the year to make, the design lifestyle possible?
Well, yeah, I have targets.
I hear that.
I mean, with the big IP game, I did a cost breakdown based on all the crazy promises, based on how many copies Target was planning on ordering, all this stuff, and it seemed like within the next 2 years, I would have $60,000 of income from this game alone, right? I ended up making 0 on the project, so that was a surprise. But again, I also do a little bit of design and development work. It's not much; it's a few $100s a week, but from a couple different publishers. So that is enough to just scrape by. I don't have a savings account or anything like that. I'm totally what Adam was saying about the terror of, he doesn't have the terror of trying to make a living off this. That's my daily life, is the terror. But it's okay, because I have a credit card, and when things get bad, I live on that. And then when things get good, like back in March when I brought in, $200 and some $1,000, things get good again. And so there's a way to function. I don't recommend having a family to support, or cats, because the truth is I can barely feed myself, and I live on potatoes and beans.
Right. So David has another question. So Joey, you've walked away from a couple things where the profit or your artistic vision doesn't match. But have you ever walked away from something where the profit isn't worth the effort? that you know you're gonna have to put into that, and how often do you see things like that?
This is I can give you an exact cost breakdown of an example of that. So I designed a game called Gods and Secrets, which I'm super excited about. It's this light little card game. And in fact, I ended up getting a co-designer for the latest version, John Perry. So I talked to the publisher, and the publisher just told me straight up, just so you know, we're planning on making 1,500 copies of this game unless the IP it's based on just blows up and does really well, and which I think it will do. But if it doesn't, that's 1,500 copies. Based on my 10% royalty and the cost of the game and splitting the royalty with my co-designer, I broke it all down, 1,500 copies. So for a game I've been working on for almost a year now, and this is the 18th version, I'm going to get $825, and I'm not walking away. So, yeah, I mean, if you have a good relationship with the publisher, and if you're proud of the game, and if they're not changing, what you're proud of, then it's totally fine. Would I publish the game myself instead? Maybe I would, but I'm really busy with my own stuff, and they have relationships with particular distributors that I don't have that might end up making the game do really well, and maybe we'll do a second print run that'll be bigger. But as far as guaranteed profit, that's about it. But it's okay, because I look at that part of my life as a hobby.
Okay, good. Adam, so Matt Dunstan from the UK, hi Matt, by the way, is questioning, does the perceived commercial success of a game become a consideration for you in terms of what to prioritize in your design time?
Yeah, definitely. I've had little kind of designs that I've worked on the side over a long period of time that I don't think will be particularly commercially successful. They might be hard to pitch. I have the perception that a publisher might not be really interested in them, and so they're kind of off to the side. If I come up with something that I think really could be a hit, I'm spending most of my time focusing on that, obviously. If I can see something blowing up, it really adds to the excitement and my process. I pour all my time into this, and it comes down to passion again. I guess it's tied into the commercial as well in this case. But if you can see something really blowing up, it'll increase your passion for it. I've got that with a game I'm working on right now, a party game that I think will just be awesome. But yeah.
Well, actually, I'm gonna follow up. First of all, plug Guerrilla Marketing. Love that game. We got to play it at Origins, and it was super fun. And it was so much fun that I believe you got stuck playing it like 3 times, because every time some people started watching, they're like, "I'm in for next round." So you were stuck at the table playing basically the rest of the night.
I don't mind. I love
a good
playing
sign.
it. Yeah.
Very good sign. And kind of along that lines, you mentioned before that you usually do kind of unique designs or unique IPs for your games. And I'm curious, we have this conversation actually happening on our GAC forums, and I kind of want to bring it in here. But how much do you think theme matters when you're pitching your games and making your games? And how is that driving you, for instance, while we're talking about kind of creating for your own fun versus creating with sales in mind? How do you navigate those waters of picking a theme that's super common and maybe safe to sell versus trying to come up with something original? How do you navigate those waters?
I tend to go more off the wall with themes. I want to be original. That might be a detriment sometimes when it comes to publishers, but they can always re-theme. So I find it much more interesting to have, rather than a high fantasy, I find most of that stuff boring. I want leprechauns building rainbows. I want a bunch of players sitting around trying to deduce the meaning of life. I want interesting themes, interesting components, and that, that drives my passion. I think it really helps with your hook if you have an interesting theme. You can bring into that theme into your quick 30-second elevator pitch and get a publisher's interest, which is so important.
Absolutely. I would echo that for sure. I'm curious. We have another great question from Matthew Dunstan. I want to point this to Joey. He asks, do you think as designers, your efforts in promoting your games in any way, social media, whatever, your connections, do you think that influences sales? And how much of your time do you devote to that, specifically promoting and encouraging your games and their sales?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with this because unfortunately, even the games I've sold, most of them haven't come out yet. But I am positive that the answer is yes. And especially if you're passionate about one game. And I've noticed that if I go around at a convention and I see a small publisher who has one game and their entire booth is one game, I am way more likely to remember that game than if I go by the Stronghold Games booth and they're pushing 20 new products, even if they're by celebrity designers. Honestly, I personally remember that one game being pushed. And if I see that person at the next con, and if I see that person on Twitter, honestly, for me, if they kickstart a game or if the game gets sold to a publisher and it comes out, I'm going to buy it, or at least I'm going to know about it. So I think the answer is yes, but it really has to do with being passionate. You can't just promote it in a sort of generic way because people see through that. And honestly, people are too busy to care about most games that come out, especially if it's not a celebrity designer or if there's no reason to trust in the game. Just be passionate and don't have all of your updates be the same thing. You can't be, remember, the game's being kickstarted on this date or the game's coming out on this date. It's got to be, here's another video talking about strategy. Here's a video talking about the different factions. Here's a video talking about where I'm trying to get my mother to learn how to play the game. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. You just have to be passionate about it. It does make a difference. Is it going to be a difference of a lot of money? Maybe not, but it's going to be a difference that's going to be worth it.
Okay. So for love or money, let's talk about money for a second. Advances. What, Joey, do you think is a decent advance? And do you want an advance that is something that sustains you, or just something that, makes the publishers have a little skin in the game or a little trust? What are you looking for in an advance?
It totally depends on the contract. If they can't change the game at all, if the game will be untouched, then I think no advance is acceptable. Especially if it's a game where they're taking a lot of their time and they're trusting you to have made a good game. You have to offer a fair amount of trust to them. If that isn't your contract, which it rarely is, then some amount of money so that is fair, because often there's projects of various genres where basically somebody could just basically be off the street, and have a good website and look like a publisher, and you don't really know who they are. They haven't really made anything yet. Them offering you no advance is a huge red flag, I think. If somebody gives you even $500, that's a huge difference between, they're serious, they're going to make this game, or at least they're planning on making it, versus no money. They may not really be that serious. As far as a game that I'm passionate, probably sell it to a publisher. I certainly wouldn't let them change the theme. That's that I'm proud of, but it's not really something I'm going to pursue otherwise. I would say somewhere between nothing and $1,500 is a fair advance. The only reason I was offered the $3,000 on the one project was because it was a massive, massive time investment on my part.
And that was more like almost like a corporate buyout. It was almost going to be work for hire.
Not in that particular case. I still was getting, I think, a 3% royalty on that particular project. But it was a game that was inspired by another thing I had been working on. So to some degree, yes, I had an idea basically to make a Jurassic Park style game. And I was really excited about that, but I was also distracted. So I was able to turn that game into this other game. So the advance partly was basically, well, you can't make that other game that you want to make.
Right.
So to some way, in some regard, it was a buyout. And then the stuff I'm working on right now as a developer, like I'm working on for months now. I've been working on a Paul Peterson design called Dungeons Are Dangerous. And that game, they just give me money weekly, and I have no royalty, and I may not even receive credit, maybe developer credit. But the point is, that one, I simply, you just got to talk to the publisher and know up front and know what to expect, because honestly, very few publishers can afford to give real advances.
Right. That's interesting. We'll talk about that later on the after show. But Adam, question to you. Oh cow, we're getting close to time. But the question I wanted to ask you is, because we talked about this a little bit in the before the show even went on air, was promoting yourself. So the idea that, you know, there's love and there's passion involved, and then there's money at the other end. In the middle, there has to be some sort of promotion of your goods, marketing of your stuff. How much do you do of that, in terms of using like Twitter and whatnot? We had talked about that before, so go ahead and see what you think.
I haven't gotten into Twitter very much. I know I'm tagged in your Twitter post there. I don't tend to do much on Twitter other than retweet jokes and stuff, but I should get into it some more. I found it increasingly important for me. I want to get my name out there. I want to get into this world. I think a big way of getting my name out there, an approach I've used, is entering contests. I enter a bunch of design contests. I've been a finalist for a whole bunch now. One of my games won the Ion Award in Salt Lake City this year. And that was a huge jumping off point for me, because it got my name out there. Cypher got signed by Mayday Games while I was down there. They also signed another of my games. So that was my first two signings right from there. The press releases from the Ion Award, again, gets your name out there into the internet world. And I had a publisher contact me asking if Cypher was available. It wasn't at that point, but then they took another of my games and that one got signed. So getting an online presence and getting your name out there is huge. And that's what I've been working on over the past year a lot, trying to get to conventions and meet people and make these connections that I didn't have before. I had all these what I feel are quite solid designs building up, but I didn't have that network, and so I hadn't had any signings. And now that I'm meeting these people in the industry, it's been enormous for me.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we're starting to run out of time, but I want to squeeze in one more audience question, and then we'll get into our traditional last questions. I'm going to jump to Joey on this. We have Board Game Authority on our YouTube channel asking a question, and specifically for Joey, and I'd like to get this in. So did Chaosmos open the door that allowed you to start working for these other publishers? Are they pursuing you? Or is it the other way around? I'm sure some people are interested in finding development work and all that kind of stuff. What's kind of your story on how those kind of opportunities started to arise?
Yeah, it's funny. The game didn't sell that many copies, in that it's not ready for a second print run yet. So I think maybe it might be a little too heady of a game for general audiences. To a point where I'm even thinking about making a junior version of it. But as far as respect from the game design community, it's been really, really life altering. There's sort of a mecca of game designers here in Southern California, and I'm lucky to be a part of it. And because of that game, a lot of people who haven't even played it necessarily are familiar with me, and because it's got a couple interesting mechanics. So getting to work with Jeff Sidek on Battle Stations very much happened because of that game. Getting hired by Breaking Games to do some development work for them happened because of that. And then the company that I won't mention for the really big contract, he was a fan of the game, basically. And so he thought, okay, well, if he can do this. And I think also to some degree, he wanted to use one of my mechanics in his game and didn't want to be a jerk and just steal the idea. So he went right to the source and hired me to basically use that mechanic again. And And I thought that was really classy at the time to hire me, even though the project didn't work out for various reasons. But so yeah, definitely, I think if you focus on one game that's really special and put a lot of work into it, it will pay off in ways you don't necessarily expect. And as far as getting hired as a developer, to some degree, you have to seek that. I mean, I don't really necessarily want to be a developer on anything. I want to be a designer for my own stuff. But when it comes to the first of the month and it's time to write a check to your rent, it's nice to know that you have a little bit of safety net there from helping develop games as well as design.
Excellent. Great points all around, guys. So we're running out of time. We should actually probably do a show on development soon again, just because it's something that's coming up more and more. But now it's time for last questions. So last question is when we ask each of the guests to give a piece of advice to designers out there. So we're going to start with Adam and then go to Joey. And the question is going to be revolved around, money and all that kind of stuff, and profit and passion. So Adam, I'm going to ask you the question first. So give a piece of advice to new designers in terms of finances. What should they be doing in terms of something financial to make sure that they're not in dire straits?
For new designers, don't invest too heavily in your prototypes. That's the biggest thing. That's such a money sink. That's something I did a lot, especially early on. I still do it at times. Spending too much making your game too pretty. It can be a downfall both financially and the fact that you've got this really chromed up game that looks great and maybe people are reacting to it more positively than they should. It's kind of a smokescreen for the design maybe not being as solid as it might be. If you've got a game that's a bunch of pieces of paper cut out, it looks horrible, but people love it, then you know you've got something.
Good advice, good advice. And Joey, same question to you. So what's one piece of financial advice that you give to new designers or even experienced designers?
Well, yeah, I'll just briefly to say on the prototyping, I would say if you're experienced enough to know that, to have a little bit of experience pitching and know that your games aren't terrible, then I would say do invest when you go to a convention to pitch to publishers in having your prototype look good. But other than that, when you're playtesting, certainly not. As far as the other thing goes, I will say don't count on any money at all to ever come in from your game. And that will be a good place to start with your planning for your game. Because, with Jeff, for example, with Battle Stations, he was going to make that game whether he made any money on Kickstarter or not. And so to bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars was nice. But the truth is he has overseas deals for his other games, Lifeboat and stuff. You can't expect to make $1. If you expect to make money off of it, especially these people, they watch these Kickstarters that blow up and they think that could be me. No, it can't. It can't. Exploding Kittens happened because somebody had worked for free for 10 years promoting something else, which led to that. So no, assume you'll make nothing. And then if it does well, or if it sells a couple thousand copies, or even a couple hundred copies, always plan to make a Game Crafter game first and get it out there. And if a few people buy it, then consider yourself a massive, massive success as a game designer.
Great.
Well, you heard it there, folks. Thank you, Joey and Adam, for spending time with us. Some great insight and some stories, hopefully that inspire and encourage you on your journey as you design and try to make games that people can enjoy and love. A little plug for next week's episode. Hopefully we'll have Matt Fantastic and Amber Cook, and we'll be talking about how to make a brand as a designer, which I think ties out of some of the points we had this week. If you have any questions or comments for our guests, I'm sure you can track them down. You heard Adam's going to hopefully be on his Twitter a little more often. And I know you can reach Joey. He loves a good chat, a good debate. So feel free to pick their brains and get to know them. They're great guys, and I think, are a couple examples of the next wave of designers that you'll be seeing lots of games from. So until then, keep playing games, making games, and I look forward to playing your game someday soon. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks.